Speaking of irony, let's hear from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, because even as he is presiding over this crackdown on free speech, he's still claiming to be a defender of free speech. And he's given a couple of interviews recently. Here he is talking to Mike Benz about how much he cares about free speech.
Is there any insights that you can provide to the American people about how the State Department is going to go about once again restoring free speech in a world where we are facing foreign threats from the European Union and Brazil and other places to Americans' ability to talk?
Yeah, so the first thing, obviously, is our number one priority is Americans. So we don't want to see an American who happens to be living in London or happens to be living in Europe post something online about American politics or any politics, and all of a sudden they're facing ramifications over there, or they're denied entry, and something happens, we're denying them into our country, or we're going to arrest them because they posted something while living overseas. So our number one interest is the impact it has on Americans.
I mean, is he doing a bit? Like, he's describing his own policy about foreign people here in the U.S., and he's saying he's so concerned about that happening to Americans while he's doing that exact thing to people who are living here, people from Turkey and Palestine and South Korea. I mean, it's like, is this a joke? Are they just toying with us? This is just extraordinary.
If it's a bit, he's really committed to the bit.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I think they're like really screwing with us just because, I mean, it's just unbelievable, the hypocrisy.
And let's hear more. Here is Marco Rubio talking to, what's his name? Ben Shapiro.
So let's talk about this major move that you just made at the State Department, getting rid of a big chunk of the censorship bureaucracy that had been created and pushed a while back, but then exacerbated over the course of the last few years, hidden. What's the story with what you are doing over at the State Department to get rid of the body formerly known as the Global Engagement Center?
Yeah, I think you have to understand the history behind it. It's real brief. They started it by saying, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all these terrible groups are radicalizing people online. We should do something about it. And, back when they came up with that 12 years ago, whatever it was, people are like, whatever makes sense. And then it metastasized. And it's like, there's foreign interference in our elections. We need to start going after that. Well, then by 2020, it became a movement to go after voices inside of American politics and begin to label people. And they put a guy in charge who basically was going around saying Trump speaks just like these foreign terrorists. His supporters speak just like these foreign terrorists. So now you have an individual running a State Department entity that was labeling American speech by Americans as foreign interference. And then really the kicker was not only were they doing all that formally from the State Department, but they were taking State Department money and they were giving it to these third-party groups who were supposed to be like independent, verified arbiters of what's true and what isn't, what's good and what's bad. And these groups were deliberately targeting. I believe you were one of the ones they targeted. I think the Federalists began putting labels on people. Now, you may say, okay, well, what's the importance of the label? Well, that's not just the issue here. The issue is not only did they put labels on people, that was then used to go to social media companies. It was used to go to outlets and say, you have to deplatform these people, or you have to cut back on how much views they're getting. You have to go after them, in essence, silence them.
So, Jenin, you have unique insight here because you actually challenged the censorship that Marco Rubio is talking about when it was under Biden. What Marco Rubio is again leaving out is he's now presiding over his own censorship regime, which includes labeling people as supporters of terror, even though, of course, they've never, A, supported terrorist groups, and B, ever been accused of supporting terrorist groups.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is too much for me to take almost. So, and just by almost, I guess you'd say coincidence, the lawsuit that he's referring to, the Federalist versus the State Department, I represent the plaintiffs in that, the Daily Wire and the Federalist, so also Ben Shapiro's group. And so we exposed a lot of what the State Department had been doing, which is supposedly in an effort to combat foreign misinformation, had ended up censoring a lot of domestic speech. And they were sort of doing that through funding various tools and technologies that could be implemented by companies to sort of ferret out so-called foreign disinformation. But there's really no way to do that. And at some point, it became clear that they actually had the intent of suppressing misinformation, disinformation, and not even about foreign stuff. So including about COVID, 2020 election, all of that. So we had got discovery in that case and exposed a lot of it. We're now sort of in talks with them, possibly settlement talks, given their new stance or the new administration stance. I don't even, like, the irony is just, it's beyond astounding. I don't know if Rubio himself is just incredibly cynical and knows but doesn't care, or if he's really that brainwashed that I mean, and there's an extent to which I don't like to throw the term racism around lightly, but I do think there's an extent to which, like, that censorship was mainly about white conservatives, of white conservatives. And this is about brown people from other countries. And so he might really just not see what's before his own eyes.
Yeah, there's definitely a built-in dehumanization of Palestinians, I think, that is motivating so many politicians, members of the Trump administration, but also it's pretty bipartisan. There's definitely more hypocrisy that I'm going to ask you to respond to, including from our very own vice president. Hopefully you respond to that, won't get you kicked out, deported or locked up. But returning to the story of Massam Madawi, you tweeted out a clip of a video of him being interviewed by 60 Minutes. So I want to show that clip, and then also something that you said about it on Twitter.
The night of the rally, I believe someone in the crowd said something very anti-Jewish, not just anti-Israeli, but anti-Jewish.
Yes, this was as a walkout on November 9th. And a person who is not affiliated with Colombia, we've never seen him, we don't know who is this guy, comes down the stairs yelling, "Death to Jews." I was shocked, and I walked directly to the person and I told him, "You don't represent us because this is not something that we agree with." And directly what I've done, I took the megaphone and I gave a speech and I said, "We here are conscious, educated students, and we know how to separate right from wrong. And what this guy has said is wrong. What this guy has said is clearly anti-Semitic against Jews."
Anti-Semitic.
To be anti-Semitic is unjust. And the fight for the freedom of Palestine and the fight against anti-Semitism go hand in hand, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
So that's Massam being asked about statements made at a Colombia protest. And as he points out, it probably wasn't even someone from Colombia, and he condemned that. So you wrote something very interesting on Twitter. You wrote, in this clip below, he talks about how he rebuked a protester at Colombia who made an anti-Semitic statement. "It's always been clear that the Trump administration's monstrous campaign is about stamping out pro-Palestinian activity. I initially thought they made a mistake with Khalil," as in Mahmoud Khalil, "and accidentally picked someone who had not said something even remotely objectionable or committed any crime. Now it's clear they're targeting those people specifically to entirely chill any pro-Palestinian advocacy. They will not succeed." And then you also write in another tweet, "The fact that the Trump administration chose as their next target of persecution someone who had explicitly renounced anti-Semitism and made efforts to combat it at protests suggests they really want to shove in our faces that this is about pro-Palestinian advocacy, not anti-Semitism." So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I initially thought with Khalil that they had made a mistake because they're stupid. Sorry for my language. But that they didn't realize that he had a green card. They thought he had a visa, which seems to actually be clear because apparently that's what the ICE officers said when they showed up.
Yeah, you hear him saying that.
And that these people are taking advice from groups like Beitar, who call all pro-Palestinian advocacy terrorism and that kind of thing. And that, people like Secretary Rubio are actually really ignorant and don't know the difference and just accept these representations. So I initially thought that because I was like, why would you go after Khalil? He's really hasn't said anything wrong. He's been involved in the protests, but they can't pin any activity on him. Nothing even anti-Semitic, which is still anti-Semitic speech is still protected. Hate speech is still protected speech. And I don't think people should be deported for it. It's a little harder to make that case publicly in this environment, I can say.
But he happens to not have said anything anti-Semitic. In fact, he talks about Palestinian and Jewish liberation being intertwined. Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I initially thought they erred, and then they were like, oh, shit, we're stuck with this. Sorry if I shouldn't swear. Now we have to kind of defend it because we don't want to admit we made a mistake. But the fact that everyone they've gone after since is similarly kind of faultless, like even from a moral perspective, let alone a legal one, suggests to me that they're trying to send the message that they're actually going after just pro-Palestinian advocacy. Because why would you pick people who have explicitly renounced anti-Semitism, who are the woman who was kidnapped from Tufts by 6 masked men who went up to her on the street on the way to her Ramadan Eid dinner? Why would you pick someone who just wrote an op-ed arguing that that the Tufts administration,
they're called for or something?
Yeah. Like, surely there are disruptive people. Surely there are people who've behaved badly, probably said some actually pro-Hamas things that would make a better PR case. So that's why, that's my theory at this point.